Na 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 hey ya na ha ya na na hey ya na. In 2006, Time magazine had a cover story, God versus Science. Well, they obviously wanted to create a lot of conflict and sell a lot of magazines. But today we have atheists like Richard Dawkins and Lawrence Krauss that want to put God against science. This is really silly if you kind of think about it. It's like putting a creator up against the mechanism to study his creation. That would be like putting Shakespeare up against the literary genre technique of deconstructionism to figure out how we got the story of Hamlet. It really doesn't make any sense when you think about it. You know, when Isaac Newton, who's the founder of modern day physics, discovered and formulated the law of gravity, he didn't say, "Wonderful, now I've got a law, I don't need God." No, what he did is, in his masterpiece, Principia Mathematica, is describe how this law and all the laws show that there has to be a creative kind of divine force behind the laws of the universe, otherwise they wouldn't make sense. Because God is an explanation, but he's not the same explanation as science. God is the agent who designed and sustained the universe. Science tells us bits and pieces about how he did it. So there's a profound difference between science, mechanism, and law, and difference of agency. So to show this, let's say we have a Ford motor car, and I say, I want you to choose between two explanations on how we got the Ford motor car. One is mechanical engineering of the law of internal combustion and mechanical engineering, and two is Henry Ford. Please choose. You would see this as kind of a dumb way of explaining. You don't have to pick one, you could have both. Henry Ford doesn't compete with the law of internal combustion. In fact, Henry Ford makes sense of the law of internal combustion because he used the law. It shows that he used the law to get the car. This is exactly the same way if we think about God and the universe. God isn't competing with science. God is the grand explanation of why science can explain the universe and why it makes sense. Because if we look at it, the speed of light, okay, it travels the same speed everywhere, always and everywhere, the same, 186,000 miles per second. It's called speed c. And if you think about it, this is kind of weird. Why does an inanimate object like a light always follow the same law? Same thing with an electron. It follows the same orbit, and this orbit determines the chemistry of life. You would think that these would be random. But when you see that there's some grand intelligence behind the laws, everything seems to make sense that why these inanimate objects follow laws. So when we look at creation of the world, you know, when I was a kid, I saw Fantasia, and in it we had volcanoes and oceans, and then a lightning struck the ocean, and boom, all of a sudden there's this paramecium swimming around, and then this simple thing grows up to be this great complex creature. Well, that's kind of a good way to describe it to children, but as you get older and you learn more about molecular biology in the last 50 years, it's exploded with new information that has shown us how complex life is. You have Watson and Crick's discovery of the DNA molecule and what Crick called the sequence hypothesis, which he proposed that there are 4 chemicals along the spine of a DNA molecule that function exactly like alphabetical characters in a written language or digital characters in a machine or computer code. And since then, we've had the Human Genome Project and the ENCODE project. And all of these projects have revealed not only do we have digital code inside the living cell, but that digital code is structured and organized in much the same way that we use digital code in our most sophisticated computers. In 2004, there was this article in the Scientific Journal by Trevors and Abels, and the title of the article was "Chance and Necessity Do Not Explain the Origin of Life," period. So if we consider, for example, the primordial cell, the cell contains in it DNA and all the complexity of life. And Bill Gates, has said that the cell, the DNA is like this giant software program, only far beyond anything that we can create. So the cell contains in it DNA, RNA, and the makeup, which is 3.5 billion letters of the genetic code written in exactly the right order to create life. And that same 2004 article that looked at the cell said all of this information in the cell, it looks like software to us. Now we have scientists like Stephen Meyer and Michael Behe that show us that this information in DNA, it's specified information, meaning it's very specific. It requires a certain sequence, just like my phone number requires that the numbers be arranged in a certain sequence. Otherwise, if they're not, it won't produce an effect. My phone won't ring if you change the numbers around. The same is true with DNA. DNA has to be in that precise 3.5 billion letter order. It's like a 3.5 billion letter phone number. They have to be arranged in that certain way. Change the order and life ends. So this challenges the fact that life could have arose from this random process of chemicals arranging themselves together through, just an unguided process. Because, you drill down and now we see it's information. But our experience of information always comes from an intelligent source. Whether we're looking at hieroglyphics or machine code or a giant book, a headline in a newspaper, if we keep tracing that information back, it always comes back to a source, and that source is a mind and not a material process. The same is true of the cell. And the same is true of how you want to build life. If you want to build a new animal, we now know you need code and lots of it. It's kind of like if you want to build a new computer or a new software program, you need a lot of specific code, not just random code that actually performs a function. Same thing is true with if you want to build a new animal. You need code, you need information. And again, we always see information, the only source of information is intelligence, not a random process. And to prove this, Roger Penrose has calculated that if you took all the particles in the entire universe, the chance of them randomly assembling to produce a cell is essentially zero. There's not enough time in the 14.6 billion years of the universe for this to happen. So the idea that a bolt of lightning hit a pond of molecules, that would be like saying that you got an automobile or a jet from a lightning striking a pond. So what this shows is that there's some grand design, there's some grand mind behind all the laws of the universe. This kind of goes back to in antiquity, Plato and Aristotle asked, what is the thing from which everything else comes from? What is the prime reality? Is it mind or is it matter? And the more we study the intricacies of the universe and the laws of nature, the more they point to a grand mind behind it all, and not so much a material process. Thank you.